good day to you. This is Todd. I am a regular dude walking in the Word. We are looking at the book of Numbers right now, and as we go verse by verse through, eventually we'll get through the whole Bible here, but we're in the book of Numbers right now. And in Numbers 13, I'm spending 2 episodes on this, looking at how you had those 12 spies went to spy out the land. They were commanded by God to do this, okay? And as they went to spy out the land, they came back, and what we talked about yesterday, 10 of those spies, they forgot about God. They took God out of the whole equation. So they said, we can't possibly do this because we can't do this on our own. These guys are like bigger than us, all right? But then you had the 2 spies. You had Caleb and you had Joshua. And you had those spies and like, yeah, we can take this land because God's with us. They remembered everything God had already done before us. The other 10 guys must have forgot about everything God did. So they remembered how they were in Egypt and how the 10 plagues were sent by God. And if you just think of like even one of those plagues and the awesomeness of what God does there, that should have inspired you. But there was 10 plagues there. And so they got out of Egypt. And imagine the impossibility that would be. You're slaves in Egypt, have these 10 plagues, and you're sent away. You're sent away with booty. Okay, they sent the people of Israel away with gold and silver and everything else. So they sent them away, and on the way, then Pharaoh's army chases them down, and Pharaoh's army, is drowned in the river, and then it still continues on where God continues to take care of them. He provides the manna and everything along the way. But those 10 spies must have completely forgot about it. And then you have the 2 spies that did not forget about it. And they're trusting in God for this. Today, it's entitled, I'm a grasshopper. Okay, you're thinking to yourself, grasshopper, what's he talking about? Well, look at the last verse of chapter 13. And you're going to see what I'm talking about. So let's read here today. This is Numbers chapter 13. I'm going to go through it, but I'm not going to read all the names that I read yesterday. All right. It says, the Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe send one of its leaders. So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites. These are their names, okay? If you want to know their names, go ahead and read it for yourself in chapter 13 there, or listen to yesterday's episode. And then we're going to skip down to verse 16. These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land. Moses gave Hoshea, son of Nun, the name Joshua. When Moses sent them to explore the Canaan, he said, go up through the hill country, or through the Negev and on to the hill country, and see what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad, and what kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. It was the season for the first ripe grapes. So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as the Rehob, towards Lebo Hamath. They went up through the Negev and came to Hebron, where Aham and Shishai and Talmi, the descendants of Anak, lived. Hebron had been built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes, and 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the valley of Eshcol, because of the cluster of grapes that the Israelites cut off from there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. These guys had been out there for 40 days looking around the land, and God gave them specific instructions as to what he wanted them to do. Check out the land, what the cities are like, what the people are like, what kind of food is growing there. In fact, get samples of the food. You're to bring the sample platter back of the food so we can see what it's like. Verse 26, they came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here it is, here is the fruit, but the people who live there are powerful and the cities are fortified. Okay, so these guys are talking now and like, oh no, but the people are powerful and in the cities they're fortified and they're very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. Amalekites lived in the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live in the sea and along the Jordan. So these guys are giving all these bad report about everything, making it look like it's really bad. But verse 30. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. Okay? But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. All right. I want you to compare what Caleb said in verse 30 and compare what these guys said in verse 31. Caleb said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. Okay? He has God on his side. Okay? He said, we can certainly do it. He doesn't mention God, but he said, we can certainly do it. And I'm sure it's not because of like, hey, look how strong and great I am. All right? But he knows he has God on his side. But verse 31, but the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people, for they are stronger than we are. They have taken God out of the equation. All right? And so they're saying, we can't do it. Okay. They don't have God in the equation at all. Verse 32, and they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they had explored. Sorry. They said, the land we are exploring devours those living in it. Can you imagine? The land devours those living in it. They weren't devoured. Well, they were walking around there for 40 days. All the people we saw there are great size. Wow. And we talked about this yesterday. All of a sudden, all the people living there are great size. We saw Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our eyes, and we looked the same to them. Okay. A lot of exaggeration going on here. Okay. And they're going to find out when they go into that promised land later that it wasn't this way. Okay. These 10 guys paint the picture like everyone is bigger than them, which was not true. All right. Like everyone is a giant. And then the last verse, it says, we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. So they're assuming that the people that live there are assuming they look like grasshoppers. Okay, grasshopper would be like, I've got this remote control, which is probably like 4 times the size of a grasshopper. Okay, compared to myself, I'm just a regular guy here. So it's not even like a realistic comparison here, because let's say this is a huge grasshopper, this remote control, and I got this. You got this grasshopper, and then you got me, which is like, I don't know, like 300 times the size of this remote control here. So they're saying like, oh wow, the people there are like 300 times bigger than us. Is that true? Not at all. Not even close. Okay, they might be a little bit taller. They might be 10% taller, maybe 30-40%. If they're really big, but they're not 200 times bigger. And so they have this they exaggerate. They have this exaggerated view because they've taken God out of the equation here. I heard a sermon on this like many years ago, and it always stuck with me. This sermon dealing with the grasshoppers. These 10 spies saw themselves as grasshoppers. They couldn't do anything, okay, and they had taken God out of the equation. The 2 spies, they never looked at themselves as grasshoppers. Caleb and Joshua never ever said, "Oh yeah, we're grasshoppers, but we're like super grasshoppers." They never ever referred to themselves as grasshoppers. They referred to like we're warriors because God's on our side. So when you make yourself out to be like the grasshopper like that, you're basically saying to God, I don't have the faith that you can take care of us and do that. God said, I will bring you into this promised land. I brought you out of Egypt. Okay, that's a huge step right there. And then taking you to that promised land. That's another huge step. And then I'm taking you into the promised land. You're like, you might break it up into three portions. I get out of Egypt, I get to the promised land, and then I need to get into that promised land. Okay? You think God's going to go, well, I got you out of Egypt, and I got you all the way to the promised land. Now, you're on your own. You can get into the promised land on your own. No, God never said that at all. God said, I will get you into the promised land. And so that's what those 10 spies had forgot all about. And so they looked at themselves, and it's an exaggeration there when they did that, as we're just, wimpy little grasshoppers. We're tiny. We could never do that. And so we talked about it yesterday. When you forget about God, it skews everything. But when you look at yourself as like, I'm a grasshopper, you've taken God out of the equation, and you've taken your faith in God and made it into nothing. Like, God could never do that for me. But when I trust God that he can do that for me, I'm way beyond a grasshopper. I don't even look at myself as a grasshopper. Okay? So, are you a grasshopper? I know I'm not at all. I'm a regular guy that just, a regular dude walking in the Word. But I serve the Lord, so that's what makes me great. Thanks for watching. I am a regular dude walking in the Word, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we continue our journey through the book of Numbers. Lord's blessing. I'll see you then.